Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht. I'm the Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. I work with Donnie Featherman, who's also here in Building Codes and Standards. And this is the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for April 9th of 2024. We got quite a few things to discuss. I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint. Donnie, I made you co-host. If you see anybody else pop into that participant list, I appreciate you just admitting them. So that we get everybody in. Can everybody see that screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Once I go to screen share, I don't get to see anybody anymore. So please just shout out if you, and I think there's a way to do that. But we'll just go with this way. I can see the chat and I can see hands go up in the participant list if you want to jump in with anything. So basically, we're going to do a quick round of introductions, and then I'll talk a little bit about the guidelines and the scope, and then we will talk about the big change I think that everybody needs to be getting ready for, and that's the update to the IEC 2021 and adoption of the Model Electric Code and Solar Ready Code. These are, we've been talking about them ever since I've been here. The effective date is January 1 of 2025. I want to talk a little bit more about standardized climatic solutions, standards for modular, fire suppression system requirements, tiny homes again, then the ICC NBI standards adoption, and then moving forward with that is not 2021 code set adoption. That should be 2021 code set adoption versus looking at 2024 or staying with 18. So again, I've introduced myself. Donnie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Donnie Featherman. I'm the program manager for the Building Codes and Standards section. So I oversee the functions of our program when it relates to factory built structures.
Okay, and we're going to go around the TAC members. We'll start with Dean.
Dean Dalbett, owner of EV Studio Architecture and Engineering, with a studio that focuses exclusively on offsite construction and design.
Thanks, Dean. Structural engineering is Justin Fluckey.
Yep, structural engineering. Been in the modular world since 2006.
Okay. Janine Snyder is a building code enforcement from Park County. She's not here today. Tim Pate.
Hi, good morning all. Tim Pate, City and County of Broomfield, building official, also a board member on the Energy Code group, worked on the electric ready and solar ready code, and now we're working on the phase 2. So I'm a wealth of information, better or worse on that code.
Better or worse, or someplace in the middle. Thank you, Tim. Mark Lindsay is not here today. He's another building code enforcement representative. Sumit.
Hi, Sumit Santankar. I'm a QA manager for Custom Instrumentation Services Corporation. We're a small manufacturer for building small commercial equipment buildings for power plants and other utilities, things like that.
Great. And Sumit sits on the mechanical engineering and contracting slot. I don't see James McLean. He is the electrical engineering and also from Arapahoe County. Plumbing industry is John McGee, and I don't see him here today. Charlie, you want to introduce yourself?
Morning, I'm Charlie Chupp, CEO of Fading West, and we are a modular builder here in Colorado, focusing mainly on attainable, affordable housing projects around the state.
Great. And then we have Mike Morrow sitting in the construction design and producer industry. Mike, can you introduce yourself?
I'll fill in for Mike. Mike is the CEO, or no, sorry. Mike is the, what is his title? Managing
General manager.
plant manager, general manager.
Plant
There you go.
manager.
Thanks.
Yeah.
General manager of Bonneville out in Nebraska factory. Sends a lot of stuff to Colorado.
All right, then we have Sean Roos.
Yeah, Sean Roos. I'm general manager, Clayton Homes of Grand Junction. We do manufactured modular home, and I'm also a general contractor.
Great, and then Nate Peterson. Nate's actually sitting in the organized labor slot.
The organized labor slot this year. Nate Peterson, been in the modular industry a long time in Colorado. Been an installer, been a dealer, and hopefully, not hopefully, soon to be factory owner.
Absolutely. And Tracy?
Morning. Tracy Manchego with Tiny Building Experts out of Colorado Springs.
And Tracy sits in at one of our tiny home slots. And then Tawny, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tawny Payton with the Rocky Mountain Home Association. We represent the manufactured modular home industry in Colorado. And I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Would you like me to invite the sellers and factories to these meetings?
Yeah, I think we're going to do that, Tawny. I've got a master list of everybody that we pull out of Salesforce. We would be happy to add your list when I send out that newsletter. So maybe we need to, and it automatically dedupes out of MailChimp, so we could take your list and plug it in if you want us to.
Okay, all right, we can connect on that later. So
Absolutely. All right, so with that said,
Sam, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, Mike.
Oh, that only took 5 minutes of fighting with settings. So, okay, good. I've figured out that riddle. So, all right.
All right, good. We can hear you. And Nate said some decent things about you.
Yeah, everything he said, it's all true.
Okay, good. Mike, I just have to admit, Mike's one of the old timers on the TAC, and he doesn't let us forget that. And we appreciate his institutional knowledge. And we've got a few other old timers here too, but we welcome the new people, and we look forward to taking the administrative rules forward and doing all these updates.
I didn't think I was that old, Sam. That's hurtful.
I know, right?
Well, old being as time served on TAC. How about that, Mike?
Well, hey, Mike, just a funny story. So at least you weren't at the last RMHA meeting where they gave me a lifetime achievement award. It made me feel very old.
You're right up against it, man.
But I enjoyed it. It was nice, but it was a little bit of a moment.
Speaking of awards, just wanted to share the news if you guys haven't seen it. Mo and Donnie and I went to World of Modular in Orlando, and Colorado received the Modular Administrative Program of the Year. We're the second state to get that. Virginia got it the first year. It's a fairly new award, but we were very happy to receive that. I would be amiss and we didn't get a chance to give a speech, but certainly you guys are a key part of this team and a key part of this award. And I want to share it with you guys too. So this is actually on the LinkedIn Department of Local Affairs LinkedIn page. I will stick a link into the next newsletter. And then you guys can do with it what you want. But you guys as TAC members have been instrumental in making this program work. And I do truly appreciate everything that you guys do. I know it takes, you guys take time out of your schedule to participate in this, and you know, it doesn't go unnoticed. All right, just for those that may be watching this on the video and planning to attend future meetings, you know, this is a technical advisory committee meeting as described by statute and our administrative rules, and priority time will be given to the TAC members. guests are welcome to comment by raising their hands in the meeting. Tawny, you of course are an honored guest, and don't be bashful. You never have been in the past, but if you jump in with anything you want to. For new members of the public, it's best if you have a base understanding of the statute and the administrative rules that we are talking about, and the references are on this slide. We're only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules. We can't change what is going on in other states. This got important to us last year as we were talking about tiny homes and what they're doing in one state or the other. But we try to focus ourselves and put boundaries on what we're talking about with respect to Colorado law and Colorado rules. I do like to hear about, and I often try to pull it out of my manufacturers, is how's it working in other states, or other states doing things that are better that we could do better. So at any time, you guys feel free to jump in with those recommendations too. And then to keep us moving, as we got later into the cycle of rulemaking last year, we started getting newer people every single meeting with more and more questions. And so what we tried to do is, again, give them the background of statute and the administrative rules that we were working with, the red line versions we were working with. And then to keep us moving, I did actually at one point ask for comments in the forum, which could be easily adopted to the rules. With that said, I want to mention that we do have some future guests coming to some of our meetings that are going to that we will be talking about. One is either the 521 or the 430 meeting. The Attorney General's representative will be here for the annual training requirement for the TAC members only, and that'll be an executive session. It'll take about 30 minutes. I'll set up the meeting as a separate Zoom, that once the motion is read to go into an executive session, that you guys can jump into the other meeting. It is recorded for 30 days only and then deleted. I will actually send out an attendance list this week or early next week to see if 430 or 521 works best for everybody. I have to have 10 TAC members to come and move into that, go into that executive session. That's the 2/3 rule that we have to have. So that's coming up. That's same date for 521. We are looking to have Adam Berry with the Colorado Energy Office come and talk in specifics about the IECC 2021 update, the Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready Code. We're going to have a meeting with Adam next week to kind of talk about some things that we have seen going through those. And I've got more details in a future slide on what it's going to mean to the industry in Colorado, as we as we are required to adopt the Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready Code and IEC 2021. So that'll give you guys to prepare some time and have some I want to have some really good, robust discussion with Adam on what they expect, and so that we can also build it into our rulemaking. We still are looking at standardized climatic standards for modular, and that would be, common wind load, snow load, and winter design temp for units across multiple jurisdictions. If you guys are doing that in any other states, I would be really happy to hear how that is working. Most states, from my understanding, have a single set of building codes they have adopted. We are a little unique in that we cover a lot of different climate zones, from the low spots over in the southeast corner all the way up to the mountains, and so there's a lot of differences. But if we think there is a need to do that, and it might help the industry, but it's going to take a little time and money to do that. So I wanted to see if you guys think that is worthwhile also. So we'll have another discussion on that coming up. The fire suppression system requirements, we're going to have Colorado Fire Prevention and Control come on June 25th. We believe that's the date that works for them. I'm waiting to hear back. And we'll talk about some of the challenges any of the manufacturers have had, especially with the multifamily, of getting inspectors. We had a good meeting with them before we went down to World of Modular. There is some movement up there, and I'm going to type up some notes from that meeting and share with them, and then I'll share with the group prior to that June 25th meeting. But it does look like they are willing to allow the QA people in the factory to get the required certification to do the in-factory inspections, and then third-party agencies can also get those requirements too. I think it was a inspector 2 level, and then once the unit gets out here, they are trying to make sure that there's enough people to do the on-site inspections for that. So we'll have a future discussion on that. Tiny homes, I want to huddle with Tracy some point next week or so and figure out what all these code changes and what's going on with the tiny home industry, and see if there's some experts that she would like to bring in, or if she wants to lead some discussion on why we've not had any manufacturers sign up for state certified tiny homes, and maybe see if there's anything we can do. We know that at the local level, we are still getting a lot of local government level. We're getting lots of questions from local governments about how to permit tiny homes. We want to make sure that that's going okay across the state, but see if we need to look at any changes. Donnie and I have also talked about these individuals that build tiny homes and how that might work. If they're not a factory, if there's some way to accommodate that with still meeting all of the requirements to get the state insignia for their personal tiny homes. And then we are going to have somebody come in, and it may be on April 30th. It may be one of the other meetings to talk about the ICC MBI standards, 1200, 1205, and 1210. We had them actually review our rules, our statute and rules, and then point out a couple areas where they thought that we might make some modifications to come better in line with that. So we'll have them out and make some presentations. Tracy, you and I'll schedule a call. I appreciate you responding in the chat on that. So we are going to bring in some outside experts, and then we will try to get those wrapped up as soon as possible so I can start looking at red line changes for the administrative rules.
Hey, Sam.
Yep.
On the fire prevention and control one,
yep.
Can we make sure that there's somebody from NTA that joins that meeting? You know, that they're obviously they're really involved in trying to figure out all that kind of stuff, and so we need their expertise in the room for that one.
Great idea.
We will do that. Robert Lee seems to be pretty vocal on that. I'll get in touch with Mark Lindsay, who's our who's actually a TAC member, and make sure he has the right team there to answer those questions.
Yeah, we need to be able to talk about what all the other states are doing instead of creating our own process there. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Nate. Any other thoughts on this slide? Okay.
Sam, quick question.
Go ahead.
Yes, on the standardized climate standards for modular, when are we thinking that will get onto the agenda?
Did you ask me when we thought we might have something ready for prime time?
Yes, or what's the target? Do we have a target set for when we can have that conversation, or?
So there's a couple things, and being kind of realistic, Donnie and our engineer have looked at it from a implementation, and there, it looks like we can group some things together that would come up with some pretty good standardized standards that could be implemented. What I want to make sure is that we put what we need to in rule to allow that. And then we can start trying to get that written. I think it is going to be a rule change. Tawny, you asked in chat. I think it's a rule change only. I don't think it's a statute change. It says that we can defer to the locals for wind, snow, and winter design temp. And so if they approve our model code or our model set for their jurisdiction, then we would be still within our statutory requirement. So I think it's a rule change.
Great.
Hey, Sam, just real quick, I just wanted to add that what we're thinking is that it being an option, not necessarily across the board type of adoption. So this would allow some manufacturers to build to a specific zone. And so that product can go anywhere within that zone instead of having it specific to a jurisdiction or specific to a site location.
Right. And so it would, yeah, that's the way we're looking at it. And so if we build, say, 4 sets of wind and snow loads and it covers 90%, then we're doing pretty good, right? And because the standardized models can always exceed locals, but it would be up to the locals to say, yeah, okay, you're 10 miles per hour off on wind load, but we'll adopt it for your modular units, and then we keep that on record. But it would be an opt-in for them. We cannot require them to change their wind and snow load. We can ask them if they want to increase their housing stock and affordable housing and workforce housing.
Tracy has her hand up, Sam.
Oh, good. Tracy?
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I'm glad that we're gonna have a conversation about that, because just remember, you guys, the tiny house community is, already working to make some of those adjustments, because as we start to standardize for extreme climate.
Yep. And so you guys are building in the springs, and then people want to take it up into the mountains. So it'd be nice to have one or two. Is that what you're talking about, Tracy?
Well, what I'm saying is we don't want to build to, climate 1,000 elevation all the time when we have houses that are also sitting at, 5,000 elevation, and other, or 6,000 elevation. So we want, Pueblo, Colorado versus, Silverthorne or whatever. So there's differences for us as well. And just for us, it affects the sleeping lofts. That's all.
Yep.
Main level living houses, it's not a big deal. But as we start to, take more inches from the house on the inside, it just affects sleeping for the people who are truly trying to be minimalistic.
Right. We also saw some interesting wording in one of the accessory dwelling unit bills that also talks about model ADU codes. And so if that bill gets signed, then we're going to try to wrap this into that also.
Sam, Dean has his hand up.
Yeah, I know we're kind of slipping down this rabbit hole already, and it's a TBD in terms of when we're actually supposed to talk about it. But I agree with Charlie. I mean, this is a huge deal for manufacturers. But I just want to put out there, I mean, for those of you who are exploring how to come up with, some standardized climatic standards, our direct experience in designing all across Colorado is that your highest snow loads are not often coincident with your highest wind loads. So you wind up with this matrix of design criteria that don't always put, low, medium, high in the same respective places. So I just want to throw that out there because it does complicate matters, and, would happy to be a resource on that as you're evaluating that. But it's not as simple as elevation. Wind load, seismic, and snow are are three competing factors in all various parts of the state.
Right, and so, yeah, Dean, I'd love to get your input as we start fleshing this out a little bit.
Yeah, and just for clarification, the wind and snow loads would be building to a certain rating for the design criteria. The biggest factor is the energy code compliance. But that's where the energy code, if you look at the IECC, a lot of the zones from 5 to 8 are very similar in insulation requirements. There's a slight difference in zone 4, but there's only 3 jurisdictions in the state of Colorado that have zone 4, and that's like the bottom southeastern corner. Those 3 jurisdictions that are there that actually are within that zone 4 area. But yeah, we can definitely discuss a little bit further about the design criteria for wind and snow loads. At least maybe creating zones that way, because even if you built to this snow load, this wind load, everything below it should comply with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything from this zone down to down will be compliant with that jurisdiction. And then even at the highest level, highest wind and highest snow loads, anything below that would be compliant. It's the energy code compliance that you can't really do that with. So,
right. And for what it's worth, I mean, as part of that discussion, if you find that it's too complex to try and create, 3 or 4 zones across the state that can manage all of those buckets, consideration of design parameters that are plainly listed on the product that says this is our design criteria for wind, snow, and climate. And then if you're meeting or exceeding any jurisdiction's requirements, then that product should be compliant with any of those jurisdictions, in theory. But that would be like a completely different kind of path to go.
It is
give manufacturers some control over, hey, this is the product we're going to build. These are the criteria we're going to meet. And, it puts
it takes it out of an address like we're doing now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Decoupling the address from
Yeah.
the design criteria.
That's a good point.
And not, again, sorry to go down this rabbit hole because I know it's to be determined, but yeah, Donnie, when you say that they have to opt in local communities, if the state stamps it as approved for that jurisdiction, why do they need to opt in for the state's, stamped drawings for that jurisdiction?
yeah, I don't think I said that, but the question, so right now, the current requirement is that locals are to accept our structures as is per our adopted codes for their jurisdiction, as long as it meets the wind, snow, and climatic conditions, right?
Okay.
So it's not really an opt-in for these potential structures. It's more just that, hey, these already meet your wind and snow loads.
Right.
There's going to be that energy component that we have to work with so that it's still compliant with their jurisdiction. So it either meets or exceeds their requirements, right?
So
Charlie,
the key is that right now, statutorily, they have control over those items. So if we want to propose something to them, they have the right statutorily to choose whether they opt in or not. In the future, we might be trying to possibly, that's one of the few things, wind and snow and seismic, that are not under the jurisdiction of Division of Housing. So if we're doing anything in that area right now, they have to agree because it's under their control technically.
But that's only if we change something. If they have published wind snow loads and the state sees that what we're building exceeds that, they don't have to opt in.
Correct. Right.
Approval
because it just meets it.
Because it meets it. Okay, that's my only question. I was just
And also, Charlie, the thing is that a local, as long as our products are being built to their wind, snow, and climatic conditions, they have to accept it per the building code, right?
Gotcha.
But zoning may not allow for that structure to be installed in that jurisdiction. So that's the only time that a local jurisdiction can deny the installation of our structures. It's because their zoning doesn't allow a factory built structure to be installed in their jurisdiction. So like mobile home parks, a lot of jurisdictions right now are starting the process of removing mobile home parks. And I know that I can't remember what jurisdictions, but let's say they do have an existing mobile home park and somebody was to move a structure out, they're not allowing that mobile home park owner to move another structure in because they're trying to downsize that mobile home park, right? But that's because their zoning allows them to do that. When it comes to the building codes, as long as they're meeting their minimum wind, snow, and climatic conditions, there's no reason for them to deny the structure.
Are there any zoning restrictions on an IRC modular home? I know
Not that I know of, but there's a possibility that there is. It might be for like not specifically a jurisdictional restriction, but it might be for like a what do you call it, HOA?
HOA, yeah.
HOA doesn't allow for it.
Architectural control is where it usually shows up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a comment on, or a suggestion, if we move forward with this standardized climatic standards. I think it's going to be based on what I just heard, the potential of, I agree that if it came into Broomfield, if it didn't meet our wind and snow, seismic's not the issue here, then we would not accept it. But if this goes down the path of what I think I'm hearing of doing the standardized, and if we're going to then take that choice away from jurisdiction, the locals, we're going to have to reach out and do a lot of public outreach to get opinions from the locals as part of that potential rule change. It's critical.
And we couldn't do it in rule. That's the thing I want to clarify. Like if we did that, Tim, because I agree with you, that would be like a big, effort. That has to be done in statute.
Yeah.
Okay.
We drew a map and said zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, Colorado's zone 1, and said the locals have to adopt everything or locals have to accept these units. Then yeah, that would be a statutory change to that. If those units are designed to exceed all of the local jurisdiction requirements, then we'd be okay. Now that we may run into a problem if they bump up their own requirements or they change their requirements, we'd have to go back and revisit that. But if we said, hey, we want to build an ADU model for the Eastern Plains or the Front Range, and we're going to design it to that, would you guys opt into this to make it easier on getting everything built and done and delivered? And then they could say yes or no, right? And we could keep a running list.
That seems
I like
like a
the
hard
idea
path.
of taking the address off of it, like Nate mentioned. If it exceeds, then it should be able to go any place that meets all that. And we currently do that. If a unit is built to one place with a specific address, and then they want to take it to a lower requirement place, we allow that address change. That's not a problem. Sometimes we have to say, okay, like Dean was saying, wind is a little bit different here, and temp is a little bit different here, and oh yeah, now we've got seismic. Then you've got to come back and modify those drawings, right? Charlie, I interrupted you.
No, I'm sorry. I was interrupting you. I was thinking that would be the path, is more understanding the current codes and then creating a matrix of when something is approved here, it supersedes all of these other local jurisdictional codes, so that we're not trying to convince people to change. We're just saying, hey, once this is approved for this location, here's everywhere else it's approved for. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
It's very similar to ADA on commercial projects, right? Like what we really need is a safe harbor. If we just establish a safe harbor for design criteria, then everybody knows that they're compliant. And I think that's relevant specifically also to the fire protection conversation that's going to be coming up in a month here, because there's lots of different source inputs and lots of disagreement on who actually has the authority to drive this, that, or the other. And right now, the state of affairs is factories are terrified that they're going to meet one standard but fail to meet some other standard that they're suddenly expected to meet after it's already built, and then they've got a very expensive remodel project on their hand. And I think all of these issues are very similar in that there just needs to be clarity on that. What would that safe harbor be?
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing I point out, and Donnie, you probably know this with your plan review staff, that there was a significant change in talking about wind design requirements in the 2021 IRC and the IBC. And when the 21 went through and finished and got published, it referenced the ASCE 7-16 standard, wind standard, which for some unknown reason that they removed the Front Range areas out of the high wind warning area. Or we know it got windy this last weekend, so I know.
Yeah, today may not be a good day to talk about wind requirements.
Well, I'm just wanting to point that out because there's a good paper that SEAC, Structural Engineer Colorado, put together on trying to explain to jurisdictions what happened there and what the locals can do about it. But apparently the updated ASCE standard is fixing that to go back to where it was. And that's apparently going to be in the 24 IBC. I've got a copy of it. I haven't double checked that, but as we're talking about the wind going back and forth in different areas, at least in that Front Range with the high wind area. So I just wanted to point that out for.
Yeah, if you could send that to us. I wasn't aware of that. I know that the new ASCE, I believe, has tornado provisions in it. So we're aware of that. And we're not sure if that's going to be something that we need to implement as part of our adoption of the 2021. So
I'll send that to you, Donnie, and then you share it with your staff and the team. But what we're finding out is what we used to, under the 18 codes, our design standards, at least in Broomfield, it used to be 110 ultimate, but it would come back in at 143 mile per hour, 139. And now we're getting the engineered calculations coming in on these to be about 108. And we can't turn it down because the structural engineers are using the calculations out of the ASCE 7-16. I've got probably half the engineers that are still going the old route, probably just to be on the conservative side, you might say, to make sure, since they know that it wasn't less windy, but it was some weird change. I'll send that to you, Donnie.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, every time we get it's a fact of life, right? Every time we get a major fire event or a major wind event or group of tornadoes pop down, we're gonna have to work through these things, especially if they start feeding back into the adopted levels that we have very little input on, right? All right, I want to jump back to the slide deck and start talking about model electric ready and solar ready codes for a few minutes. This one I'm not sure I did as detailed a job last time prepping everybody for this, but I want to start talking about some very particular things. And Tim, I want to jump into, and that's another reason that we have Adam Berry coming up to talk through these things. All right, so you guys should see that slide there. So the final electric ready and solar ready codes have been published, and I would recommend that the architects and the manufacturers and everybody start taking a really good look at these. It was developed by the Colorado Energy Office as a part of a statutory requirement, and there's more information on how they did that on that second link on this. And I will get this slide deck out to everybody. I did not get it done yesterday in advance of the meeting, so I'll get it out to everybody after this meeting in case they want to take a look at it, and then I'll get it posted to the website also. So this is the same slide that I had last week. And this is the same slide I had, or not last week, for the last TAC meeting. I had this slide too. So this is what it says in our statute, is that on or before January 1, 2025, will adopt and enforce and an energy code that achieves equivalent or better energy performance than 2021 IECC. And the Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready code language developed for adoption by the Energy Code Board, which I just showed that it has been adopted. And the Energy Code must apply to factory-built structures and hotels, motels, and multifamily structures in the areas of the state where no construction standards for hotels, motels, and multifamily structures exist. We may make amendments to the energy code that the division seems appropriate through rulemaking here, as long as the amendments do not decrease the effectiveness or energy efficiency of the energy code. Now, I've added a third slide to this that this is where I want us to really think through this. The way that Donnie and I understand the new IEC 2021 is that blower door test and duct testing is required. That HRV, heat recovery ventilation, and energy recovery ventilation is required for climate zone 7 and 8. So those are a couple things that will drive at the bottom of that slide a revision to the rule 2.7.7, which is the 2015 IECC amendments. And before we were just doing an air barrier checklist, and we had at the bottom here, if not complying with the first paragraph, an air leakage test shall not exceed 5 air changes per hour in all climate zones and shall comply with one of the compliance methods in R 401.2. So we've got to take a look at revising that rule also. The Solar Ready code, the way we think we will implement that is that there'll be a new sheet in the plan set showing the designated roof space for solar panels, and someplace in that drawing, the electrical conduit runs from that designated roof space to the panel. And then with the Electric Ready code, that's going to be sizing that panel for all electric, if it's not already all electric. And probably the way that we're looking at it right now is the electrical vehicle charging capacity, which may be a little bigger breaker box, is our guess.
Charlie has his hand up.
Charlie, go ahead.
Question on the blower door test. Is that something that's going to be able to be done on site, or are we?
Yeah. I mean, you almost have to, Charlie, right?
You do,
especially for the 2-box unit. You could probably do a 1-box unit in plan if you wanted to, but once you get those things married together, then it's going to be a blower door test on site.
Right.
They are doing, and I wish, who's our energy guy?
Robbie Schwartz.
Robbie Schwartz. I wish Robbie Schwartz was here. I'll reach out to him also. But they are starting to do more blower door testing for locals. We're hoping to depend on the locals, and then I'm buying all new sets for our guys to do those blower door tests as part to help meet this requirement. And they've all been trained.
Dean has his hand up as well.
Yeah, what we had our team review these when they first came out, and I just wanted to point out a couple things that are giving us some concern or some pause around just the way that this code is written.
Okay.
There
Good,
are
Dean,
some elements,
because that's what I want to hear.
yeah. So I've got at least 3 key concerns specific as they relate to offsite construction, but kind of at the top of that list is there's over general language in the code that says if you're not currently, providing solar in order to make it solar ready and model electric and solar ready, that you have to anticipate future equipment. And we don't know how to do that, right? I mean, nobody knows what future equipment will even look like. does that mean our equipment rooms need to be bigger or smaller or the same size, or does that equipment live somewhere else, and how does that even work? So there's just a great deal of ambiguity in saying, hey, here's a code that says you're going to have to design to meet a future code that is unwritten. We don't know how to do that. That's
so,
one thing. Oh, go ahead.
And I appreciate that, Dean. So that's why we think we can get by with meeting that requirement. We say, okay, this area of the roof will support solar panels.
Right.
And-
Well, that takes me to my next concern. Yeah. So there's language in there that says the space for future solar panels must be, you know, not shaded and so on and so forth. Well, I can do that if I know which orientation my building is built. But if, you know, if Charlie is building 17 of the same home and they're in a community that are on a U-shaped cul-de-sac, guess what? You're going to have shading on one side of that cul-de-sac and not shading on the other. And we can't control a consistent design for any manufacturer, because the manufacturer often doesn't even know what the orientation will be. So again, it creates an ambiguity because
right,
it's written for a custom home design or a custom building design where we can, you know, we have one site, we know exactly how we're going to lay it out, and we have the ability to change the roof design in order to meet this specific solar ready code criteria. And that just seems like an overreach to me. So that was kind of the other big one. Lower on the list of our concerns is the EV parking spaces.
yeah,
the electrical load for EV parking spaces can rival the electrical load for a home in and of itself. And so, you know, it's unclear how many parking spaces, how is this intended to be met, and what kind of utilities have to be brought into the site either now or in the future to be able to make that happen. Because once you've got a house and driveway and landscaping and all of that in, you've kind of removed the feasibility of bringing some of those utilities into the site. So it's unclear, is there a level of infrastructure that a community level developer has to consider now in order to meet the solar ready code? Because we're talking, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of infrastructure if that's the case. So again, a little unclear to us on how exactly we address it. Those I would say are our top three.
all right. I'm not sure I caught all three. So I got the universal orientation of for roof loads as an example,
Right, like roof design, and then it talks about like physical mechanical rooms need to be designed with additional physical space to accommodate future systems. So let's say, for example, I have a hot water, a gas fired hot water boiler, but I need to design it to anticipate a future electric only hot water system. I don't know if that future system is larger or smaller or what it will be. And so what does that mean to our physical space? I mean, I don't know even how that would be evaluated.
right? Okay.
You know, theoretically, we can all hope that, well, as the future progresses, things get smaller, but as the future progresses, criteria gets more restrictive. So it could actually require a larger heat pump system in the future to do a domestic hot water heat pump system than it does today, perhaps. You know, we just, they're just unknowns that we can't control or can't design to. And then the third one is EV charging stations and what level of electrical infrastructure needs to be contemplated at the community level and at the lot level.
So those will be good questions for Adam too. I mean, with respect to the EV charging, that is going to be whether or not it is. I'm not sure there's any developer requirements now to put those things in. Maybe they are being adopted by local communities. I don't know, but we would consider that the same way we would consider wildfire mitigation. We're just looking at materials on the house to be wildfire urban interface compliant, not the turnarounds in the cul-de-sacs or any, you know, how wide the roads are going in and out. That's all going to be outside of our scope. It will drive up total and development cost, I believe. But as far as the unit itself, I don't think that goes into our design criteria. or our plan set. Donnie?
Sure. So, but even on that note, like if I have to design an electrical panel to handle the significant additional load of an EV charging station,
Yeah.
then Charlie and Nate and every other manufacturer on the call has to oversize their panels by almost 100%.
Is it that
single
big?
module they're
Okay.
building, right?
So then, yeah, that's a really good question, and I did also write down how many units. I would hope one would be a minimum. But yeah, if it's more than one, then yeah, we are probably looking at 100% increase in panel size.
Right, which is expensive. And again, if these homes are going in places that don't even have the infrastructure, then what are we exactly accomplishing?
Yeah. Yeah, Donnie?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things we need to do is, basically kind of create a table, one for residential concerns and one for commercial concerns.
Agree.
But the other thing too is that, it just says that we have to prep for it, right? It doesn't say to a maximum or a minimum. Well, the minimum is you're prepping for it. So even if we get an average size of a electric charging station, I don't think the law will prevent us to design to that minimum. Because if the homeowner decided they wanted to get an upsized unit, that's a choice that they made. But at a minimum, if somebody, majority of them are probably going to have a charging station that, you can, I think there's some of the hybrid vehicles that we have a 115 volt or 120 volt charging connection for slow charging, and then they have the fast charging as well. But at a minimum, if we're providing the preparation for those types of charging stations, I think we're meeting the law, right? If somebody wants to build above that, then they're going to have to run that additional, I guess, the panel size and breaker size and electrical runs for that system. But we're providing a minimum that it's prepped for these specific, I guess, not vehicles, but anything that meets this rating.
So
Right.
Donnie, let me ask you another question then, and this just popped into my mind. Would it be as simple as saying this is where you put a sub panel for model electric for electric charging? Is it just a sub panel pulled off the main box? Hell,
Well,
I
I
had
think
a panel in for a hot tub, so and
Yeah,
one barn.
So I think as long as you have a panel that's large enough for the addition of that electric charging station, if we say a minute or up to a 240 volt system, then that's what we're designing to. Like, hey, there's enough open breakers here or open connections here that you can connect a 240 volt. If not, you can do a 120 if that system allows for it for that charging station. That's all we're requiring. We're not requiring them to 100% increase on the panel size, because we think that there may be the chance that they're going to do it. It's just like, hey, we provided a section or a portion here in this panel that's providing this capacity for a charging station. If they want to go above and beyond that, I think that's just going to have to be handled at the local level for I guess a local permit, or if it's already known, I guess, that they're going to be providing this capacity, a higher capacity system for those charging stations. But I think we provide a minimum, this panel size for a 240 breaker. And so you can do a 240 or a 115 or not 20, whatever the amperage is going to be for that 20 amp or 15 amp breaker for that charging station inside that unit. But I think there's certain things that I have to look at and see when it's going to be required, because I think if I remember correctly, at least in the IRC, it talks about when you're providing like a garage or not a garage, a parking spot. You're at a minimum have to provide one charging station. I think it's good for one vehicle. But if you're providing more than that, there's some other stipulations in there of providing more. So I have to look at that a little bit further.
Could I make a couple of responses for Dean's? Broomfield, we adopted the electric ready code as of January 1st. So we are wading our way through those types of questions. And absolutely, when we started out of the gate with our production builders, we internally, my staff and I, and we talked to Adam. He's going to be a great resource to answer your questions, a lot of these questions, but the minimum requirements for the solar, of course, it's if you have a 300 square foot or greater roof area, you've got to designate just the little dotted line on the roof plan. That's where it's going to go. And then a proposed way to get to the electrical panel. Typically, solar companies do not go through the attic. They always come down on the outside. So you just make a note on the plan. We get our production builders just to redo that. Needs a minimum dual pole breaker in your panel for future. Doesn't matter how big of a system could go in, because eventually if someone actually comes and does the PV system, they will have to do the engineering to show what they need. And if they got to upgrade their panel, then so be it. That's part of our local permit process. The EV needs 140 amp breaker. This is not I don't remember if it's got to be installed, but I think you got to have that space. And then on the electric ready, you got to have a two pole breaker for each appliance that would have gas. So, and so you have to size your panel size. We have been requiring electrical one lines from our production builders, and none of these houses, we got townhouses that are anywhere from 3,500 square feet, and some single families are needing to go anything beyond this typical 200 amp service that we're seeing. Yet to see that. So I'm not sure what size panels these types of units that you guys build usually come out. 200 amps pretty standard anymore. So those are just some initial things that we've found in Broomfield through our plan review. And it's been really easy working with our production builders to get these, everything to comply. But those are great questions. And I do want to point out that, through this discussion with this group and from the manufacturers, that the Energy Code Board is in the process, just started. We just had our third meeting of many, many meetings of the phase 2 to do the low carbon. But part of our charge is to modify or amend this initial code as needed. So that type of feedback from manufacturing community and even from the builders and design teams is going to be critical to be able to give to the Energy Code Board as we move forward through the end of January. So if you're seeing the struggles of what and why, that is information that you really need to get to that through that group, because it's a public process. We have 3 public meetings that are set up. So if you go up on the CEO Energy Code Board link, it'll tell you when the meetings are and how to do, when the public meetings are, et cetera, et cetera. I highly encourage that. It'd be very helpful to work out the tweaks, because we didn't do a perfect job on this first part. And as it gets adopted and starts being enforced, that's how those changes are going to happen. Thanks.
Tracy, I want to come back to your comment in just a second, but Tim, I want to ask you, thank you for that input. During the discussions of the rulemaking or development of, not rulemaking, but the development of the codes, did you guys discuss modular very much at all, or?
No.
Okay. And there is the ability to modify that code, you said, coming up before the end of January?
Yeah, so the phase 2 portion, which is that second half of that, the state legislation that passed a couple of years ago, House Bill, whatever the number is, was the first part was to create this one that we're now discussing. In the state legislation had the rule that Sam and Donnie put up that the Division of Housing has to for manufactured. The phase 2 is expanding on that to do a low carbon code, which is going to be based on either the 2024 IECC or the 2021 IECC, whichever is more restrictive. And we know that the 2024 IECC is more restrictive already. So that is going to be the base code of the new one that's coming out. But there is the ability, there will be discussion. I don't know what part of the meeting process Adam would be able to answer that question when he comes and presents, of when that ability is to the board has the ability to amend this original section, because this original section is gonna also be the base of the new one. So if we're modifying some language like you bring out as, well, what does that mean? Or what about, you know, the size of the panel or the size of the locations? The way we dealt with that, your question, Dean, on how big of a room do you need for a future unit that you don't even know what it's gonna be? We struggled with that. An easy solution that we came up with, and Adam agreed, met the intent, would be all the houses that we have either air conditioner condensers installed, or they run the power out to the outside where the future air conditioner is going to go. And that's all we get. There's plenty of space on the side of the house. You don't have to worry about how big the closet needs to be, or if you've got a furnace upstairs and a small closet, do you have to make another closet bigger to handle like a bigger unit? But pretty much it's going to be, you know, heat pump technology is what's going to, is really where that's going. So that's how we're seeing our production builders dealing with that particular question for future electric.
Tim, if I remember right, the advisory committee for this group does have a DOLA representative. Is that right? Or is that an Adam question? Let me check with Adam on that.
Yeah, Adam's going to be a great resource here when you do get him with those types of questions and timing and ability to, you know, bring comments and questions and concerns back to the Energy Code Board. So that's tremendous that you've got him coming.
Charlie, I see you've got your hand up, but Tracy's been adding some stuff on the chat. So yeah, Tracy, this may be, unless there's some way to exempt tiny homes from the model electric ready and solar ready code, then this will have to apply to them too. But as we just talked about, there may be the possibility to show that to exempt them out of future, but I just don't know, you know.
There are no exceptions.
I'm sorry?
There are no exceptions for the tiny homes. That was not,
okay.
That was brought up through discussion in particular. And so it's a structure that's going to be going through your program now as of last year, I guess.
So Tracy, most of your units are already all electric, is that correct?
Correct.
Then you're electric ready, right? The only thing might be is if your panels are big enough to allow solar, and your roofs are strong enough to allow solar, or I'm not telling you how to design your solution, but it could be a solar pedestal solution. I don't know about Tim. Did you guys talk at all about solar pedestals?
Yes, that would be available if it's, you know, right on the same. But I should point out that there is specifically not a requirement either on the residential side or the commercial side of the solar ready that the builder has to show that the roof framing is adequate structurally. You just have to put the zone, show it on the zone. And the reason I was a big proponent of making sure that those two, it started out where that was going to be required to provide the data or the engineering calculations, I should say. And I was made a point that that's what we do. That's what the locals do when we get a solar permit. We require an engineer, you know, to say you can put it on this roof. And there's no reason to put that in because they don't know where exactly it's going to go, what part of the roof, because I think, Dean, you made a great point of, you know, orientation of where this is. And we've got production builders who are doing master homes. They have no clue what the orientation is going to be because it's going to plop on. And so they're designing just like any other part of the production home. They're designing for the worst case scenario. Same thing on the energy code. You've got to pick the worst case scenario, which is going to be south facing, where you just design it to the worst possible, you know, orientation, and then that's going to work everywhere. So that's how we've been dealing with that. But just, you don't have to have load calcs for the solar. You just got to show a 300 square foot zone, and and then the adequate panel capacity.
Tracy, you got your hand up?
Yes, it is. So Tim, so if you don't have 300 square foot zone for a roof, does that make it null and void?
That is correct.
So this would only be applicable for houses that have more than 300 square feet of roof.
That is correct.
So oftentimes we run into, when we try to do solar on roofs in tiny houses, you're now constricting to just one, one pitch, like a shed pitch, like one slope. Because if I only am 8 feet wide and I have a gable roof, right, my panels are starting to shrink. You know what I mean? And what's out there on the market, we've tried to design tiny houses with panels on the roofs and it doesn't work. Most of our tiny house customers have to do ground arrays because the panels usually end up sticking off 6 inches or whatever. So it's not that we haven't tried or attempted in the industry. There's other ways to do solar, right? It doesn't have to just be panels on the roof.
Yeah, the technical language, the language in the electric ready, it does specifically say it needs to be, I'm gonna find it here. Shall be not less than 300 square feet on the roof. But if someone came to us and said, I want to do a ground array and it's my lot and I'm going to put it because I've got tile roof, whatever, we as a local would absolutely accept that as an alternate design. I mean, it'd be.
Okay.
That would be just Broomfield, though. That wouldn't
I-
necessarily apply to all 500 jurisdictions across the state.
No, I totally agree, Dean. I mean, I'm just trying to relay, at least from my jurisdictional, but that's a great point, is this code, what this group is doing here, the TAC is in the Division of Housing is statewide. So with that in mind, that could be something that ask Adam that if that would be a clarification, because it's not lessening the code. Well, it's not making the code more, you can make the code more restrictive, can't lessen, but it's more of just providing a potential alternate design to accommodate, this type of a structure. So that's a great question for Adam, in my opinion.
Yep.
Since it is a statewide code. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Charlie, I want to go to you next.
I had a different topic. I didn't know if there was more questions about this specifically. Somebody else has their hand up, Nate. I don't want to derail this if this is topic, so
Sumit was next, and then I'll go to Nate. Sumit?
Yeah, kind of just to piggyback on the discussion here a little bit. I think I brought this up last time about, our company builds like small commercial equipment type shelters that are usually 150 square feet or less. They're unoccupied and, they dare go into power plant sites, in the middle of them somewhere. So I don't know how much of these electric ready and solar ready codes are going to apply to our type of buildings. Especially in terms of like electric ready. I don't know if we have any space or anything to put those kind of, things in, electric vehicle spots and that kind of stuff to make them ready. And in terms of solar ready, I mean, I don't know how much this kind of stuff will apply to our kind of buildings. So I kind of wanted to factor that in as well, along with these other conversations, as to how these rules will apply to our kind of buildings that are unmanned and small and really will go into like power plant site type locations. So I'm just wondering how the rules would apply for applications like this, basically.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know how non-residential is handled in the energy ready code.
Yeah,
Sorry, I need to read it
I
more.
understand. Yeah, it's just something to think about. I think as part of this
Yep.
discussion on some of these regulations. So
Thank you. Nate?
This is Sam. This is probably a question for you, high level wise. Also, Tim, so with that new electric ready, whatever it's called, solar ready code statewide, does
Yeah,
that
two codes,
code?
there's solar ready code and a electric ready code.
Okay, separate things.
It's my understanding, yeah.
Do those codes allow the Division of Housing to, for example, we have you know, we're given the right to have a statewide building code for the modular program, but we're also given the right to make modification and amendments to it to fit into the modular production process. That's why we have this committee. That's why we write rules. It's all modifications to a statewide code. Do those new codes that are coming out give this body the ability to modify it if necessary, or is it a statewide code that's adopted that then, unlike the current statewide code that's adopted, the rule committee doesn't exist? That's an, you know what I'm saying, like high level, that's an interesting question.
I understand the question, and it's not an easy question with an easy answer. I doubt we would have the ability to modify the solar ready and energy ready codes unless we follow the process Tim stated about amending it because it's owned by the Colorado Energy Office.
I understand.
And just for example, we could, there in statute it says we cannot modify the IECC to be less restrictive. We can modify the IECC 2021 by this group, but it can't be less restrictive, which we've not had before. We've had in that the ability to allow exemptions for modular as long as in our opinion that it was not particular to life safety type of issues, right? It was just a construction method type of thing. So I guess that is a deeper question, Nate, that I need to probably have an arm wrestling match with Adam on. And I would need to read their enabling statute. But my understanding is in our statute, we are specifically have to adopt that code. It doesn't give us any ability in our statute to modify that code at all. But if it's not written, does that mean we can do it?
Yeah, and the thing is, I would like the overall, I would like the ability to be able to possibly modify it with their approval. I'm not looking for like a rogue, we don't want to do something, modify it out, whatever type of a thing. The challenge that we face industry wise is when we have bodies that enact codes that aren't from our industry, we run into huge problems.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, if we don't really even have a representative over there.
Well, I'm going to look at the makeup of that board. I'm going to look at how we can recommend changes in one of their public hearings for the industry.
It would be interesting, like, because they're going to adopt this thing and then it's going to be like locked in stone.
Oh,
It'd be
it's
interesting.
adopted. It is adopted. It is locked in stone.
Right.
So that the charge comes not from the Energy Code Board. It comes before that. So there was a state legislation that was passed a couple of years ago, the House bill, that set this whole thing up.
Right.
And it's very specific in the legislation of what needs to be done, generally speaking. It just, you know, what the baseline codes are with the current one that we're talking about that needs to be done by this group is with the base code of the 21. And then the new one that's going to happen and come up will be it will eventually be the base code of 24, the way it's looking, but you can't make it either one. You can't make it less restrictive. So it is interesting that when we adopt any code locally, or how you did that through the TAC or the Division of Housing, is you could modify any of those codes and make them less restrictive other than the electrical code. You know, so the electrical code, you get your hands tied because with the state, same type of thing. You can't make it less, but you can make it more restrictive. So this path for the state energy code is going down that same path, which captures in this group on the manufacturing side. So the Energy Code Board isn't going to be able to modify the actual IECC. It could modify or clarify some of the specifics of that language that's in those different sections of, what size breaker, because the legislation doesn't say what size breaker. It doesn't
Comes down to
say
interpretation,
all
right?
it's all that code language that's in this, what we're talking about, the electric ready and solar ready code, was actually put together by Lotus with the CEO, and then reviewed and voted on and modified. So those are the more specifics of the details, not really the overall code. I don't know if that makes sense, but Adam could explain it a little bit more in the meeting, but that's how we've been moving. And we should keep in mind of, we're not going to be able to change that energy code. So let's say with this new phase 2, the Energy Code Board says we're going to also adopt the 24 IECC and maybe make certain sections in the 24 a little more restrictive, which the Energy Code Board could do, and adopt 5 different appendices. 3 of them were the ones that got kicked out by the ICC board through the appeal process. We can bring those in, and then 2 years from now, this group's going to be talking about all of that again.
All right. Mike, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I would say sort of back to what Dean was talking about. If we're going to implement this on our side, I think it's going to have to be a very basic. It seems to me like space and amp requirement over and above, what's like what's the total load calculations maybe for the house. But even then, I guess I would say, and I've in all the dealings with the local jurisdictions that we've ever had in this group, and I hear what Tim's saying, but I have a feeling that if you start to have requirements on a house that comes back and it says it's got to be over 200 amps, which I would be shocked if we don't start to see that, just because we see it now. Sometimes if you get a big house with a basement and a ton of stuff on it, in order to meet that requirement, that somewhere out in some jurisdiction where they don't care, that they're not going to just say, well, we're okay if you don't do that. And then I don't know, I would guess that over 200 amp it would be an issue, would be my comment. At some point it's going to come up, but I think for our part and our group, it seems to me the only obligation we have is to maybe provide a number of spaces and available amps to meet that requirement. And then in the end, it goes without saying, right, that I don't know how you control the homeowner. Later on you find out, well, they already filled that up with their shop and their hot tub, and sorry, we don't have room for it. So I don't know. It seems like an odd. I mean, people are going to get fined for using up excess spaces with things other than what was planned for. I don't know. It's an odd requirement, honestly, but in the end, to meet it for our group, I think it's a basic spaces and amps type of thing, which I do think we will come back with some houses and be, okay, you're going to need a 300 or 4, you're going to need some service. And the local people are going to go, yeah, no, that's not available out there.
Right. So I made myself a note, Mike. That's a really good question. And I'm going to see if, and I don't know if it's as simple as creating a checklist of approved modular, how modular will meet the following requirements of the Model Energy Code and the Electric Ready Code. And if there's some type of coordination loop, if a manufacturer wants to come up with a creative solution to do that, can we get it approved on behalf of factory built structures or offsite structures and blessed by Colorado Energy Board or Energy Office or the Energy Board to approve that? Sean, you'd asked a question about HUD code homes. I don't know that. I'll have to look particular, and Tim might know it off the top of his head, but in everything I've seen, it does not apply, at least with our codes. Our codes don't apply to HUD code homes.
I'd agree with that, it's strictly in that legislation is what we're going by.
Yeah.
And that has that one section that you put up to kind
And-
of start out with that timing and the restrictions.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think you'll be okay on HUD code.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I just have one question. But after Charlie, if he hasn't spoken yet.
So we're getting close to the end of time. We started at 9, it's close to 10:30. Charlie, what's your question? Any topic now?
More of a comment and a concern is, you know, we started this company to create affordable housing. It's one of the most important issues in the state, and what we're seeing is continual escalation in requirements and costs. And what Dean just put up is, hey, we got 1% of the people using EV technology, but we're going to start adding this expense to every single house, wherever it goes. And so, I mean, I get the desire to be social, you know, environmentally conscious, carbon, air gap testing, all electric. But when do we start thinking about families that will never own a home? And we keep raising this cost bar, which eliminates a whole nother group at the bottom of the buying pyramid. Every $5,000 you go up in a house eliminates a massive group of Coloradans, right? And as we keep pushing it up, we all feel good because we're making great houses. But what are we doing for the families that are not going to own a home and can't raise families, can't stay local, can't engage in the workforce? We're just going, it's everybody. It's just going to, let's just make the best house. It'd be the same way as making the safest car in the world. But nobody would own a car. So I understand all of these things, but where is the voice for the people who can't afford housing? That's my comment, and I think that's my concern, and obviously our passion. And I don't know where that voice is coming out when we think, oh, it's a great idea, let's add that requirement.
And I wish I had an answer for you, Charlie, but I don't.
Yeah.
I applaud you also. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm in this job is I see the need for housing, and every time we raise the bar, we knock a few more people out. I hear you.
Well, and it's more of an education piece because I'm with everybody. I want to build great houses that are environmentally awesome, that are safe, that people love to live in, that are thinking about the long term. I mean, I get all of those desires. It's almost like we need to have that pyramid out, and every time we make a decision that raises it $1,000, how many people do we just eliminate from ever affording a house? Because I think unless you have that balance of saying, is it worth it? Is that worth it? When we just eliminated most of the teachers in the state now. Great ideas, but we eliminated the police officers now. And then we get to firefighters and then service workers. And every step up, you just take a whole group out. And usually they're then they have to live in an extremely overburdened or overburdened rental situation. So again,
Charlie just announced that he's running for senator at Chaffee County is what just happened there, guys.
no, dictator of Colorado. I'm going right to benevolent. I'll be benevolent. Listen, I'm all about all these good things now.
Tim?
Okay. But I think we just need to have a voice. I think we got to figure out this.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the tech's responsibility to figure that out. I don't disagree with what you said, but I think that it'd be hard for us to do at this level. Tim, and then Donnie, and then I think
Yeah,
we'll wrap it up.
Charlie, I'm full agreement with you. I've been involved in code changes for 23 years now, and as we know, the codes across the board keep getting a little more restrictive, but the problem with affordable housing. So this is a piece of legislation that was put forward by elected officials at the state level and backed by the Colorado Energy Office and that group, and eventually through and signed by the governor who was elected. That's the process. And there were a lot of folks that spoke against this legislation, from what I understand, coming from that side of, with that philosophy, and it didn't work. And, you know, if you just follow the state legislation, or a number of new pieces of legislation that are going to affect affordable housing. Part of our charge, the Energy Code Board charge, I should say, is to review these proposals and consider affordability. It's actually in that language. And a few of us on the Energy Code Board kept bringing up that question of what about the affordability component? And I'm one of 21 on that board. And the vast majority are, how would I put that? Extreme, not extremists, extreme sustainability energy code folks. And that's why they were selected by the two different groups to get on there. And that's where this is going and where it's going to continue to go. So just with that being said, you have to be in contact with your elected officials. And that's, you know, it's a great country, great that we live in, that we have that ability, no doubt. We never want to go anywhere else, but that's how that process. So, you know, you keep monitoring it, keep speaking out, and hopefully the politicians who get elected, you know, will listen and try to maybe slow things down. That's just my philosophy.
Thanks, Tim. Donnie, last
Yeah.
from you, and then I'll bring us home.
Okay, so it kind of just aligns with what Charlie and Tim were talking about, you know, and at least in my personal opinion, I don't think, you know, the board has really addressed affordability because, you know, if you look at the statute itself, the 1362, it says in developing the model electric ready and solar ready code, the Energy Code Board shall, and it says take into account home affordability. So if it hasn't been specifically addressed in the through board, what is affordable? How are we supposed to know what affordable is? And if they can't address that, are we? I'm not saying that. Should we still enforce the code that we don't know what is affordable to our consumers? But I think it needs to be addressed in future board meetings. That what is affordable to the board, and how does that affect the consumers? So that might be able to address Charlie's situation, and then also the concerns that were brought up during the rulemaking for this 1362 statute. Because other than that, what do we have to work with? Can we make our own affordability code or affordability requirements in our statutes or in our rules, saying like, hey, if you exceed this, if the cost of this energy solar readiness increases the value of the house by this much, is it any longer affordable, right? But I don't think we can do that because this is something that the board for the energy code or the energy and solar ready needs to do. So maybe that's something we can look at as well. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have more efficient buildings. It's just that, hey, there's a component missing for us to enforce this requirement.
Right. And so with that said, I'm gonna stop recording in just a minute. We are going to try to keep focused on trying to meet these requirements as they are written into Colorado law and Colorado statute. And yes, I think it is, based on Dean's last comment, it's our responsibility at Building Codes and Standards to make sure that we help you guys adopt that code in the most efficient way as possible. And we're willing to take that to Adam Berry and Colorado Energy Office and say, hey, you know, we would like to meet this by doing X, Y, and Z. And if we do A, B, C, it's going to impact the affordability part of your statute criteria. And we may have to throw it back to them and ask them how they want to resolve it. But you know, we'll get there. I like Adam. I've talked to him several times. He's not an unreasonable man. He's probably has the same marching orders as I do. So we'll figure out how we can make this thing work best for the industry. And with that, thank you very much. I am going to end the recording.